Welcome to Big Blend Radio's Military Monday Show with Mike Guardia, award-winning author and historian. Welcome, everybody. I think at the end of most episodes with Military Mike here on our first Monday, our Military Monday Show with Mike Guardia, I always go, Mike, we've got to do something about the Tuskegee Airmen. And he always goes, yeah, we should. And then something comes up. But today, I think somebody in the skies heard me. Mike, don't you think? Someone heard me about the Tuskegee Airmen.
Oh, they sure did.
I know. I knew that if I just kept saying it over and over, it'll finally come true. We have a special guest joining us on the show today, Dr. Brian Smith. He's the president and CEO of the Tuskegee Airmen National Museum. He's joining us to talk about the National Geographic documentary called The Real Red Tails. National Geographic. This documentary is fascinating, and it shares the story of the astonishing discovery of a World War II-era P-39 airplane in Lake Huron, Michigan. Tuskegee pilot Frank Moody perished in the crash, but the significance of what he and his fellow airmen accomplished survives to this day. And this is what this documentary, it's like a 1-hour documentary special, explores the history of not only this site, this crash site, and the mission to solve this 80-year-old mystery, but it also explores and gives a really good overview of the history of the amazing and incredible Tuskegee Airmen. So welcome, Dr. Brian. How are you? Dr. Brian Smith, welcome.
Good morning. I'm doing great. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. Before I know, Mike has all the good technical questions, and it's fascinating, this discovery, and it was great to see you in the documentary. Did you ever think you would end up on a documentary for National Geographic and going diving and getting like a plane out of the ocean?
No,
I mean, it's not the ocean, it's the Great Lakes, but like it feels like the ocean out there.
Sometimes it looks like the ocean. I never imagined that I would be on National Geographic. So this is very exciting for me.
Can you give everyone, before Mike gets into this, about this plane and how this happened, give everyone that may not know about the Tuskegee Airmen. I know many people know this on our military shows and our Way Back When history show know who they are, but just a little overview of who the Tuskegee Airmen.
The Tuskegee Airmen are America's first African-American Air Force or Army Air Corps pilots. During and before World War II, America was very segregated. The Black press, along with Eleanor Roosevelt, along with African Americans, pushed the government to allow African Americans to participate in the coming World War II. We knew it was coming before December 7, 1941. And President Roosevelt relented and allowed the formation of the 99th Pursuit Squadron, which was a group of African Americans who were going to be escorting and supporting troops on the ground during the war. So that's who we were at the beginning of the war. And at the beginning of the war, no one believed that we could handle the complex aircraft. No one believed we were brave enough to go into battle. And they wanted to relegate us to, menial service, like being quartermaster or people who served the officers who loaded ships, trucks. And we wanted to participate because this was our country, and we wanted to show that we were supporting our country. We were patriots just like everybody else.
Mm-hmm. And it also, it changed things, with the pilots going overseas. And so it was eye-opening for them as well to go over. A lot of people may also, like me, think that a lot of the Tuskegee Airmen history is in Alabama, but this documentary and with what you do in Detroit, with the Tuskegee Airmen National Museum, shows us that a lot of their history is also in the Midwest and in, Michigan. How did that happen?
So America had training bases kind of all over the United States, and you would go to a base for your basic training. The airmen would do their primary, their basic, and their advanced training in Tuskegee. Then for combat training, they would go to another base, which was better suited for live fire of ammunition, uh, terrain that mimicked areas in Europe or the Pacific. And that's why the airmen came to Michigan, because the Great Lakes, you could simulate coming over the horizon on the ocean, 50 feet above the water, and get to land and then attack radar stations on the coast or go inland, 50 feet above obstacles and terrain to attack the enemy. So that's one of the reasons they came to Michigan.
Mm. Mike, I know that you've written a lot on World War II, in the Combat Diaries, and in your own book, The Combat Diaries, and others, and done a lot on,
I'm sorry, Lisa, you cut out there for a minute.
if I bail off, it's because we have like jets literally shaking the place.
Okay.
It is seriously, yeah, it's quite interesting. But Mike, did you enjoy the documentary? Did it get your brain buzzing on, man, this is a cool story to write about too?
Oh, it sure did. I loved it. I think I was very privileged to see that advanced footage of it. And, I had already an inkling of what the Tuskegee Airmen had gone through. And I certainly know that it was an uphill battle for many African Americans just to be able to serve their country. And when they did serve their country, they were put into segregated units. And even the first iteration of the Tuskegee Airmen were sent overseas with equipment that really amounted to military hand-me-downs.
Mm.
But I was very impressed by the entire documentary as a whole, and really just to learn about the fate of Frank Moody and
Mm.
all of his comrades, even those who survived training to go on overseas. Just what they were able to accomplish is really nothing short of amazing. And the wreckage of the P-39 itself, just the whole discovery and the actual in-person dives that were gone down there to salvage what they could, really just nothing short of incredible. And yeah, it underscores, I think, in a lot of ways, just how problematic the P-39 amongst all of the other early pursuit aircraft that we had at the time could be, because we were still trying to figure out we were still trying to figure out modern aerodynamics. The interwar defense budgets had really hamstrung us to the point where R&D was at an all-time low, and we had to play a massive game of catch up in order to achieve parity with the Luftwaffe. And the P-39 and the P-40 stand out as beautifully flawed examples, because for as flawed as they were, especially with a lot of the design flaws that were inherent to the P-39, you still had an impressive military record when you look at the whole story arc of the plane itself. And even though it was derided on many fronts, as well it should have been, I mean, because of the placement of the engine and also the reports of pilots who would report uncontrollable tumbling, and also the weight distribution was enough to create a lot of flat spins. It still performed as well as it could, and still was still able to give the Axis pilots a run for their money. And ironically enough, I remember when I wrote Air War on the Eastern Front, the most positive reviews of the P-39 that I ever saw were those that were recorded by Soviet pilots, because we had sent them a lot of P-39s as part of the Lend-Lease program. And the reason they liked it so much was they said, look, as a high altitude interceptor, this is really a useless plane, but my God, it's very effective at the low level dogfights. And being that most of our engagements against the Luftwaffe are taking place at elevations below 1,500 feet, this is one of the best dogfighters that we've seen to this point.
Mm. Wow.
I might add, Mike, that the Russians also used it to kill tanks.
Yep.
That 37 millimeter cannon was great for busting tanks.
Wow. Wow. And so it wasn't as good as when we're thinking, when we send out our military, hey, we're going into World War II. The gear for the Tuskegee Airmen wasn't as good as we would think, but it was good at the same time. But the whole crash of it and being able to put this back together, the way you guys were piecing it, like this is how it, how it was. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because it was like, that's like solving a jigsaw puzzle. That's insane. Trying to get it from the actual water and then clean it off and you were basically reconstructing it, right?
That's correct. A lot of people don't realize because they don't talk about it a lot, but my degree and my PhD is in biomechanics. It's centered in the auto industry. And therefore, I have done a lot of expert witness testimony in court regarding automobile accidents. So I have to go out and look at the car and try to figure out what happened in the accident, how the person was injured in the accident, and then report to the lawyer who hired me. So when it came to the airplane, I applied those principles plus my knowledge of aerodynamics to kind of figure out what happened when the airplane went down. Now, we had to find the pieces in order to start putting the puzzle together. And we found two propeller blades, but when we found the third one, that's when it all came clear to us why this airplane crashed.
Wow. So putting it together, so where is it now? Is it in your museum now, or is it kind of off? We've got to watch the documentary to see it.
So the airplane is in our museum, but not on display for the public yet. Mm. Now, it's been in the lake for, 70 plus years, and it has a lot of incrustation on it, different types of mussels on it. And those mussels secrete, their secretions, which actually helps to deteriorate the metal. There have been airplanes brought up before the invasion of these mussels in the Great Lakes, and they could almost be, cleaned up, refueled, and sent back off into the air. Wow. But our airplane is in poor shape because of the zebra mussels. Now, the parts we find that are buried in the silt and the sand, they are in pretty good shape. The parts that were exposed to water and, the zebra mussels, it takes a bit of conservation to get the mussels to fall off, to get the incrustations to come off, and then to do the electrolysis to try to restore some of the metal that rust has actually deteriorated. Corrosion has deteriorated. So that's the process we're going through now. We realize we can't get this airplane back to flying condition, and exactly how to display it in a museum has not been determined yet, but we do want to put it back into relative order. You can see once we get the wing up, here's the wing, here's where the pilot would have sat, here's where the cannon would have been, the engine, and give the viewers or the visitors to the museum the idea that this was an airplane, it crashed, it came apart, and this is not the only one. Many of the Tuskegee Airmen perished while training here in the United States, preparing to go to war, where they were willingly giving their lives or putting their lives on the line in combat. They didn't realize they would also die in training. So that's the determination, the bravery, the persistence that this is my country. I'm going to fight for my country, sacrifice my life if necessary for my country.
Yeah. Mike, for you as someone who writes, military history, not only you tell the stories of the people, like someone like, Pilot Frank Moody. I mean, his story, it's amazing because his story lives on through this finding, right? I think we can, there's the equipment, there's the actual plane and everything, but I feel like when you get to see a piece of the plane that is, part of this story, it's telling the human story, right? But looking at Mike, that had to be part of it for you, not just the gear itself, right? Is this was a human being. And, so many times we don't know what has happened to the human that has gone out there and sacrificed, right? And then these kinds of things share that story. Did that connect with you as a writer?
Absolutely, it did. And ironically enough, that's one of the things that I have told a lot of my history students over the years. I've said that, it's one thing to learn about it in a classroom. It's one thing to write a paper about it. If nothing else, to really get a full historical experience, to really appreciate history in its truest form, you need to go to an actual monument. You need to go to a battlefield site. You need to get some real-time experience with these relics from the past. And the example that I go to whenever I'm telling this to any one of my students is, I think back to when I was about 19 and I went to the Vietnam War Memorial in DC for the first time. And just seeing those 58,000 names inscribed on the wall and seeing the statues of those representations of the soldiers who fought there, frozen in time, looking at the names of their fallen comrades, that even to this day, now more than 20 years later, that had more of an impact on me than any paper I ever wrote, any manuscript I ever wrote, any documentary that I ever saw. That was really what made history come alive for me. And that's really how you make history relevant, I think, to the population at large.
I think the documentaries too do something where it's like, oh, wow, I didn't know this. But now hopefully people will go to the Tuskegee Airmen historic sites, museums. Dr. Smith, do you hope for that too with this documentary, that number one, it does share a human story, and that people will connect and not forget who the Tuskegee Airmen were during World War II?
I think about three things I'd like the public to understand and come to know. And just like you said, the history of the Tuskegee Airmen is one, the sacrifice that these men made and their dreams and aspirations that they could not fulfill, like Frank Moody. Died so young. He didn't get married, didn't have children, but I know he wanted to have children. I'm imagining he wanted to have children, and he wanted them to participate in aviation like he participated in. So the airmen who are alive today, that is their dream. They want other African Americans, people underrepresented in the field of aviation, to enjoy the joys of flight. They want them to take advantage of being a commercial airline pilot or a military pilot. And that's what the Tuskegee Airmen Museum is trying to do today. So it's trying to keep the history alive. It wants to bring you to a place where you can get the emotion of, being at the monument, sort of putting yourself into the human who was there. Because that's what we do. We highlight the soldiers, the men who flew these airplanes, who died in these airplanes, and who were successful, had victories over the enemy in these airplanes. So you get all of that emotional buy-in. You are now looking at the next generation, and you can help the next generation, by contributing, donating, visiting the museum. It all goes to help the next Tuskegee Air person get into aviation and enjoy the joys of flight.
I mean, it's amazing when you think about how short a span of time of flight that we've had as humans. That, when you think about, this has not been, being able to fly has not been around that long. And look how it's progressed. Like, I was thinking that during the documentary, how airplanes in combat has changed. Did you see that, Mike? Like, for you, when you were looking at how, fighter jets and actual, their armor going out there, right?
Absolutely.
It's changed so much in such a short span of time. That was one thing I got from that, was like,
yeah, I think just the innovations in flight that have happened have been beyond astounding. Because when I think about it, I mean, just for the sake of perspective, it it was less than 70 years between the time
Wow.
that the Wright brothers flew their first
Hmm.
airplane and when we were able to land a man on the moon. I mean, a 70-year time span is really nothing short of a blink of an eye when you take into account, the whole context of human history, that we were able to make that much of a technological leap. I mean,
Mm.
yeah, it's amazing what we have accomplished in terms of human flight just in the short amount of time. I mean, here we are barely, we're not even 150 years out from the Wright brothers even. And, here we have SpaceX and we're talking about making a manned mission to Mars.
Wow.
It's quite impressive.
Yeah, and Mike,
Wow.
I am amazed because I am a pilot and I get to fly the airplanes that the Tuskegee Airmen flew. So I've flown
No way.
the Stearman, which is their first airplane, their primary
Mhm.
trainer, and I've gone all the way to the P-51 Mustang. And the difference in those airplanes, the technology is amazing, just astounding to me. Then I have my own modern airplane, which is even more efficient and, has more technology in it. When you talk about a GPS mapping that is done in an airplane now, it is just staggering the amount of progress we made from 1903 to World War II and then to today, as Mike was saying,
Wow.
launching a rocket and bringing the booster back to be used again. It's amazing.
Is and it's the connection between machine and human, and it has to work. Like, do you talk to your plane when you're flying, Dr. Smith? I talk to my car all the time. So it's like this communication that has to happen, right? And then there's communication beyond your bubble as flying, right? Like that zone that you're in. There's
I
communication that goes out.
That's right. I talk mostly to God when I'm flying because I want him to keep the engine
I
running.
do too.
Amen. Amen to that.
But
Yeah.
it's the next generation that we talk to because they
Mm,
have to make similar technology leaps that were
mm,
made, between 1903 and World War II. That has to be done now in order for us to get to Mars efficiently
mm.
and to navigate the air system with, talking about these vertical lift taxis, self-driving cars. You're going to have self-driving airplanes.
Oh,
So leaps in technology have to be made today. And that's what we want to prepare the next generation of Tuskegee air persons,
mm,
which, by the way, is in our case open to everyone. We focus on the underrepresented in the field, but
mm,
we have a very diverse class of students in our museum flight
mm.
school.
But it's also, I know, Mike, you're, a professor teaching history and you always teach me, which is awesome. Thank you. The thing with these documentaries is that this is like this accessibility for all of us to be able to watch it, whether it's on your phone, I'd watch this on the big screen. It's cool. Um, it's accessible for all ages and no matter what your background is or understanding. And I think the documentary did such a good job of teaching someone like me who isn't all technical minded and doesn't understand everything, but wants to. And, for the next generation, I think going back to Frank Moody's, his history of who he was, it lets people know the real sacrifice that also happens in progression, right? It's not just the sacrifice of war. It's the sacrifice of understanding how this equipment works and is the equipment good enough, right? So there's that story too, that it's not just, hey, we want to have a self-driving car, but how many people get hurt in the mix on the way? And in those days, I think a lot of our military took the fall. Mike, would you say took the fall for progression, not just for the war, but that was part of it in regards to, whether it's a pilot in a plane or in someone in an actual tank. Wouldn't you say that there's that part too?
Well, yeah, and I think in a larger sense, it's really par for the course. Anytime you have an unfortunate circumstance that happens in the line of duty, the military as a whole, as a larger organization, will take the heat and will take the fall in some form or fashion. And that normally happens if there's no one person that can be identified as a culprit, or even in other cases as a scapegoat. It's when you're dealing with human lives and you're in the line of work that the military deals with, there's always going to be blowback. So I think the best any of us can do, and I think the best that the organization as a whole can do, is just try to preemptively shield themselves and try to build in that extra layer of padding, because when things go south, if anything goes south, yeah, there's always going to be somebody or a group of somebodies that are going to come gunning for you.
Yeah, it's true. And interpreting it and connecting people with it. When you were part of this investigation and going underwater, and, luckily you're in a lake, not in the ocean, right? We know what happens, shipwrecks, right? It's like in the ocean, you don't have sharks, in other words. Going out there and actually finding, parts of this plane. Did you feel like the presence of Frank Moody there? Like, feel like honor him, like really kind of understand what he went through perishing there, like feel his, I'm not getting woo woo. I'm just saying that there's a connection there when you go down and really realize that this is where someone perished, and it's extra special, in, honoring and respect, right? When you have that moment.
It definitely is. And, referring back to Mike's experience with the Vietnam War Memorial, going to that wreck was like Frank Moody's grave. Mm-hmm. And you go there, you realize this man spent his last seconds in this airplane. And here I am looking at it. When I held the control stick in my hand, it really gave me the feeling and the connection with Frank Moody, how he felt when that airplane malfunctioned, and he didn't know what was wrong and didn't have really time to think about, what to do. I think his reaction came naturally, but yes, that put me into his shoes. That caused me to have empathy with what he was feeling. And, as a pilot, I've had some of those feelings. Thank God that I was, didn't have a malfunction like he did. So it definitely was an experience that I will never forget, seeing his airplane for the first time and touching the control stick, looking at the instrument panel. It was definitely moving.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Smith. Everyone, again, The Real Red Tails is out now through National Geographic. Go watch it, learn, and let's all go to the museum. Right? We'll see you when we get to Michigan. Thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome. Looking forward to seeing you at the museum.
Awesome. Thank you, Mike, as always.
Of course, Lisa. Always a pleasure to be here. And Dr. Smith, it was a pleasure to meet you as well.
As well, Mike. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Big Blend Radio's Military Monday show, featuring Mike Guardia, award-winning author and historian. Keep up with Mike and his books at MikeGuardia.com. Follow us at BigBlendRadio.com.